still waiting for a few people to show up. Does anybody want to share, where are you coming in from? What's your Latin long? What's your city coordinates? Just so we can kind of see where people are coming in from. Venice, Florida, Dallas. Nice.
Oh, I love
We were
it.
t Allentown. We were talking about it, waiting for it before the meeting was starting. Spring break is coming up. Does anybody have any fun, interesting spring break destinations that they're heading to? I was just watching some videos last night with my kids on Legoland because we're heading down to Florida. Um, but anybody going anywhere fun for spring break? Steve Walsh is in New York. All right. Well, let's get going here then. Everybody can see our screen. Good to go. Awesome. So what we're going to be talking about today, just to kind of walk you through the agenda, is real quick, pretty standard, right? Who we are, what do we do, what does MotionWorks do, how do we approach it, what's kind of our methodology, how do we go about coming up with this data that we're going to show you, kind of a product promise, right? How do we think about data? How do we run our methodology, the pieces behind that? And as that dives into specifically Placecast, right? That's what we're going to talk about today. Population intelligence around places. We've got a whole bunch of interesting fun use cases to kind of walk you through and to see live data. And that'll be all part of kind of this demo. And then we'll have Q&A at the end.
All right, so a brief introduction on ourselves. So I'm Jessica, Senior Director of Data Services. I've been with MotionWorks a little over 5 years now. And throughout my career with MotionWorks, I've been from all ends of the information process, starting from the geofence curation all the way to final product delivery. Super excited in all the progress we made over the past years and to show you this new and exciting product.
Yeah, and my name's Kyle James. This Placecast has been kind of my incubated baby, really the last year. I've been kind of working in kind of the out-of-home industry product side for a number of years. It was at One Screen before coming over to MotionWorks a little over a year ago, and really just the whole idea of like, how do we, people don't know what's possible, and let's start showing them data on places in the real world, because the real world's so much more interesting than the digital world, which is a lot of my background. So how do we start telling those stories? And data is a really powerful, fun way to do that. So that's what we're going to do.
All right, so let's get into a little bit of background on MotionWorks. So we provide insight into past, present, and predictive data on how the total population moves throughout the physical world. So we cover use cases such as travel, commuting, dining, bars and restaurants, shopping malls. And we're going to get into a lot of these use cases later on in the presentation.
Yeah, anything that's a real place, we can measure, we can polygon it. So our mission, MotionWorks, to make population mobility data and location intelligence more accessible and actionable to a greater variety of teams, communities, and enterprises. For short, the TLRD from me is we democratize population intelligence. You don't have to have millions of dollars and a whole team of data scientists to do it. That's our job.
All right, so let's dive into the details. So here's a brief introduction to our methodology. So we start with a number of SDK data aggregators, connected car data, and a lot of first-party data, like motion sensors, transactional data, airport enplanements, and all of those sources come together into our machine learning algorithm. We start with over 200 million devices, and then we curate that panel down to devices we believe to be statistically representative of the entire population. We look at the last 90 days for behavioral analysis to identify the hourly device activity pattern to assist in that panel curation. Then we create an AI-generated digital population. And what that allows us to do is project the activity patterns up to a total population. So if it was ever your dream to be a twin, you have a digital twin in the MotionWorks population intelligence solution. If you have any questions more in detail about our methodology, please feel free to schedule a meeting and we can go as in-depth if you would like.
Yeah, it's that whole idea of a synthetic cohort, right? Synthetic audience, and every single cohort is an audience of one, right? It's your digital identity that's anonymous and not specifically you. That PII has been kind of cleaned.
Right. Yeah, everything we don't look at an individual device level, we look at a neighborhood level. That way we can ensure privacy compliance.
Yeah, privacy is super important to us. Absolutely. And our product promise, you kind of heard me, say this a little bit ago, democratizing population data through location, campaign, and population intelligence. And this graph here, the triangle in the middle, the way that we like to think about it, is all of this population intelligence data in the real world kind of revolves around these three parts of the triangle, if you will. We in the applications that we have that kind of tie to those are Popcast, Placecast, and Pathcast. Popcast stands for population, right? That's an anchor point for us. Placecast is places, physical locations, whether that be a region, a building, or an area, right? And then Pathcast is kind of like the way that people move through the world between locations. What we're going to really talk about today is going to be diving into the placecast element. And like I said, each of these is an anchor point. So although we're anchoring in this example around places and placecast, that also ties into the user journey, the path of people, the trade area analysis and the population elements of like what is the audience, the cohorts, the segments of these users that we could see that visit these locations. So you'll see those other two things drive into it, but this product's really centered around locations. And we've got other products that kind of center around these other things depending on the stories you're trying to tell.
All right. So let's talk about what's possible and what we have within our Placecast application. So at a high level, we start with our visitation, and that goes all the way back to 2019. You can aggregate that up in different levels. So you can look at a weekly average, you can look at a total, and we're also going to be releasing an index shortly. Demographics and behavior. So what wine drinkers or how many people drank wine within the last 30 days visited this specific location. So trade area. So where are people coming from that are visiting this specific venue? And then also you have the option to do some competitive analysis. We allow you to aggregate up to 2,000 locations at once in the Placecast dashboard, and you can actually pull out each individual location and sort by your top performing locations and your bottom performers. All right, so on our product detail, we cover the entirety of the United States. And when we think about a place type, that can really truly be anything that we can create a polygon around. So it could be something as simple as a bar, as a shopping mall. It could be an entire neighborhood, or it could be a farm in the middle of nowhere. I can't promise you're going to get the best results back from that, but if we can polygon it, we can provide some results on it.
One thing I would add, just because 2019 to present, like the data vintage, right, is because we're whole population intelligence, meaning if you've got a new place that you want a polygon that you care about, we could do that and go back in time on that because we've got that entire simulation that runs, on that, and we do that on a weekly basis. So,
Correct.
and a lot of other tools, if you want to start collecting data on a place, you polygon it, and then you get that going forward. We could go back all the way back to 2019 on any place in the US. Just kind of an important detail there. So the use cases that we're going to walk through, and I promise you we're done with slides. The rest of this presentation here is going to be a demo in the software. Um, but the kind of the five example or use cases here is we're going to look at one for retail, look at locations in a market, specifically some Walmarts. Um, Media owners kind of looking at it from a national location analysis, right? We're going to look at Simon malls across the entire nation and kind of see a larger place set of them, and then show how you can kind of break that up into, certain individual ones or locations that you care about. Agency, right? Look at a market comparison. How do in this example we're going to see Buffalo Wild Wings. How do they compare in the Detroit DMA versus the Atlanta DMA? Um, a vertical example, right? Conquest of automotive. There's a location that's close to me called the Motor Mile. Most metros have them. And we've got a whole bunch of car dealerships on a stretch of road. So how do they compare to each other? And what can individual locations learn to dominate their competitors. And finally, in events, I won't surprise it for you. It's something coming up soon. We'll get to it shortly, but event is a little bit tricky to do because of the way we're looking at this on a average basis. But for these venues, it's kind of fun to kind of explore what's possible. So I will tease that out a little bit longer. All right, so let's start looking at examples. And this is our CityCast platform. You heard us talk about Placecast, Popcast, Pathcast. Everything kind of revolves in from the platform side is in here. But all of the data that we have accessible, this is just the visual representation built into software. You can get it directly through data dumps, whether that's through Snowflake, through an S3 file share, or APIs. So, as we look at this Placecast data, you could get it other ways, and it's possible to. So I've got a lot of these already set up and run, but for the first time, I wanted to kind of walk y'all through this kind of let's get started process here. So we've got this ability to manage my places, place sets, and MW places, which is all places. We currently have a library of almost 700,000 places that are measured and audited in our database, and this is growing by tens of thousands each week. As if you've got a certain vertical or types of locations that you want to get into that queue, you could absolutely take them and get them onboarded for you if we don't already have them. Jessica, anything you want to say about that? You work a lot closer with that process than I do.
Sure. So we're consistently adding new locations. We also have the ability to curate any individual polygons as well that you would like. That would then show up in the My Places section. You also have the option, which we'll show shortly, to search for a specific brand across a specific city, state. You can go in layers using this search function, so you don't have to dig through all of these 700,000 locations. So in this example, we're looking for Walmarts. So you see we have almost 4,000 Walmarts within this specific sample. You can actually curate that down using that plus sign.
If I want to do it by state, yeah.
So now we're down to 240.
And if we wanted to go further, right, city. Just going to kind of show some of this off because to kind of show you guys how easy this is. And now I'm down to 8, right? And, this just shows me the 8 Walmarts in this, the city limits of Miami that actually use that. And from that, you could build out these place sets, which is how Placecast Dashboard here works. All reports are run on a group of places. So I already have
And
go
a
go
place
ahead.
set could be either, one place or multiple places up to 2,000. So it's really
Yeah,
whatever you're interested in picking out. And you can also customize these place sets. So as you create them and you decide, hey, I don't want them anymore, you have the trash icon so you can delete them from your place set history.
absolutely. So I'm just going to show you guys what does Walmarts in Miami look like, right? And this could be something where a regional manager wants to know, hey, what do the Walmarts in this location look like? Or media owner who's doing a retail media buy, right, of just these locations, because that's a new thing now that's becoming very popular.
All right, so a couple of things to point out on the screen. So this allows you to highlight when we see shoppers going to these specific locations. So you'll see we have a peak at noon, and we also have a peak on Sunday and Saturday. So if you've ever been to a Walmart on Sunday, you know how busy it gets. So you can actually tell that story using our data.
And you can see it by year. We've got this highlights and min max. You could kind of see the one that's green and pink. You could turn that on and off, but it's just kind of a little visual cue to kind of help make things stand out. In here, you could see this place set where we've got kind of these individual locations to kind of get a sense of like, all right, remind me again, what am I looking at? So all of those are there. This is what we call the visits tab, hour, day, year, week, and week over week kind of data.
And something that may be helpful too, Kyle, if you don't mind showing off, is that percentage and also average. So you can represent these in different ways. So you can look at an average for that specific hour and that specific date type, or you can look at the percentage of visits that fall within that specific category.
Absolutely. Yeah, and this is across this place set, right? These 8 places. And you kind of mentioned it earlier. Index is coming too. In the very near future, we'll have another one for index if I want to look at it. That index versus the national average. Something very, very popular in kind of the media industry. All right, let's look at some demographics and kind of walk you through some of this.
So one thing to keep in mind is we're looking at these demographics. So this gives you a overall profile of the demographics on the past 6 weeks rolling average. So you're looking at an average week within the last 6 weeks. So we have several different breakouts. We have local versus non-local, which is defined as who is over 50 miles and who is within 50 miles. So we see, as would probably make sense for Walmart, we have a lot of local visitation. We also have household income breakouts. And again, you can summarize this by an average, total visits or percent, and race and ethnicity.
Yeah, and you'll see if you see any of these graphs that have this little thing in the corner, you could expand it full screen if you want to view something larger. And each of these charts can individually be printed out to a PDF that you can then take it and put it wherever you want. Um, the entire report here, go away, can be printed out too, and that prints you everything here from this report, all the charts in all of the tabs we're looking at. So all this you could take and do, in what sort of deck or however sort of presentation you need to put together.
And another thing that may be a particularly interesting story to tell is the question of how often do people particularly visit a Walmart? So you see you have on average, a little over one visit in a week. So we could have multiple people visiting throughout the week, multiple times. The average dwell is about 61 minutes. And that's from the time that they enter the polygon and they leave. So we're seeing on average a little over an hour. And then we also have a unique persons and a total visit breakdown. So this is all representative of the average week across 8 places.
Come back up. The next tab here is just kind of a map. Show me what does a map of this look like. You see it zooms into kind of what is the current place set, and each of the locations has their own little dot, and you can hover over and see what it is. Just to kind of show you this, you can zoom in on these maps and kind of see what that polygon looks like, depending on how close or far away your locations are. That's easier to see or harder to see on some maps. So, but that is there as an artifact on that map.
And looks like we have a question too. Can you do airports? Absolutely. We can do airports. We can get down to the terminal concourse level.
Yeah, we have a whole lot of airports already in here too.
Yes, we have the majority of larger airports and also a sample of regional airports as well.
Good question. Consumer profiles. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of these.
So a nice thing about the consumer profile section is because there's a lot on this page, right? You can actually scroll to a specific section. So right now we're looking at apparel and jewelry. But if you started at the top, you don't have to scroll all the way down. You can go to minutes spent commuting. Just simply click on that and it'll zoom you down to that graph. So as we see, we have a high percentage of visitation within that 10 to 19 minute range for commuting, and then a majority of people drive, and then secondarily take the bus. So this will tell
Sure.
a unique story based on the specific places that you select and even may change venue to venue.
Yeah, and you can see like there are hundreds of these segments in here. And even if you get all the way to the bottom and want to go back to the top, this little arrow will take you all the way back up to the top again. And you saw this open when I first came in here, but this is just kind of a tooltip, just to remind you of what Jess said earlier about how does this data work? Like this, what does recent average week mean? It's kind of explained right here, so that you can bring that up if you need a clarification on it. But yeah, lots and lots of data segments depending on what is interesting to you and what kind of story you want to tell. I personally think of this Placecast dashboard as a very, very powerful discovery tool, right? Because you want to look at a place and just see what's interesting. If you're a media owner, it might be interesting to see, oh, that, all right, lots of people that um, organization contributing money to, a lot of religious people here. Okay, that's useful to know because of your inventory, right? Your product mix. But could also be interesting from a media owner that's trying to say, like, what kind of advertisers should I go and target to sell this location or this network to? And just, hundreds and hundreds of these things. Um, the last tab here is trade area.
So this is a useful section to tell you where people are visiting from. So you see we have 97% of visitors over the last 6 weeks coming from Florida, and then 95 coming from the Miami area. So again, as we mentioned, a lot of local visitation, but you can also see how that fluctuates. So you have people who may be stopping by after visiting in North Carolina, Maryland. So this will allow you to see for specific venues where people are coming from.
Yeah, and this will have some of these tabs. We're going through all of them in a little bit more detail in this example, but this will have a lot more use case than some of the other scenarios that we're going to look at. But yeah, totally can help with product mix and knowing where visitors are coming from and things. Um, and different ways you can break that out. Up here on the top, you'll notice that there's also, besides graphs, there's also a table view. And what this allows you to do is see a table, of all of these locations in this place set, where you can expand and see kind of an individual chart for them, and that data can be viewed yearly, quarterly, or weekly. And you'll kind of see as I click on this how it changes the data in here accordingly. If you want to look at it weekly, you can even drag and change your time frame all the way back to the end of or the beginning of 2019. Um,
And another thing that may be helpful if you're looking at specific locations, if you select that graph button next to the name, you can actually look at the details for specific locations.
yeah, right here. Yeah, let me click in and yeah, this is a deep, deep place insight on just this specific Walmart here.
So it's really a quick shortcut than having to redo your entire playset scenario again. You can just click on that button and you have a PDF report that you can print out.
Yep, print it right here. It just give you a super detailed. Well, I'm not gonna wait for that whole thing to load. Okay, it's still loading. But yeah, you can get all that right here. As you can see, it's got all the same segments that we saw in the previous, and I think there's even more in here. And then when you're done, you can kind of close that out. And all of this is exportable, right? You can export all of this data on all these locations in this place set, all the cohort data, visits over time, and everything directly to an export and mess with it as you want.
All right, so it looks like we have a couple of questions in the chat. So what are the sources of the demographic profile and product data? So we use Claritas and also Census Bureau data to and survey data. So if you see things like wine drinkers within the last 30 days, apparel bought within the last year, that would be based on survey data. And we also use household demographic level information to estimate that visitation. Let's see.
Mayor entertainment, sports events. I need to deploy mobile advertising campaign around the venue at least 2 or 3 weeks before the event. Can I use this platform to organize and craft my routes where I want the campaign?
So you could. So there's actually kind of a number of different ways you could do that. So if you know some specific areas that you're wanting to target beforehand, we are typically at about a 2-week lag for data, but we could potentially polygon those areas and provide insights that way. But another product that is particularly useful, I think, for this use case is going to be our Popcast Anytime, which we're not necessarily going into on this webinar, but what that allows you to view is occupancy by hour and by specific days. So you can target specific behavior or demographic cohorts at a national level or down to a postal code level.
Yeah, great questions. So that is everything here. Once we're kind of, if we want to go back to, we can hit this little lightning bolt here and it wipes us back to the restart screen, if you will. And just to kind of show a little bit more of this, before I get into some specific examples of how you could build play sets and create stuff, where, I kind of showed Walmart, but let's say I wanted to look at, I don't know, Lowe's, right? There's 88 Lowe's in here. We can absolutely add more. Some of these are Lowe's foods. I know we've got a whole section of Home Depots, 1,700 of those. These are just, kind of big box retailers and restaurants like Wendy's. I don't know if I could spell right.
Oh,
Um,
Tony, so asking about sources and specific details on the information for where that data is coming from. Yes, we have several different technical reports available that go into the detail on how the panel is curated and also a panel report as well. You can find that on docs.mworks.com.
yeah, I don't know if Jacqueline, you want to drop the link to this but there's a whole methodological documentation all here, just docs.mwork.com.
Yep, and that gets really in detail about the specifics of our panel, how we do data cleansing. So absolutely, I would recommend that for detailed reading.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, but lots of different searches. Like I said, hundreds of thousands of locations. If we don't have it in here, we can easily add them for you. Um, so I'm going to close this and go to the next example here. I've already kind of preloaded them, so we don't have to go through the whole thing of kind of building them out. But this first example here is 215 Simon Mall. It's all part of kind of the Simon Mall network, if you will, that I've kind of built out. Same sort of reporting, same sort of data, that you can all look through. Um, I guess the one kind of different story I'd want to tell from kind of looking at this is from this, drop down on places, we could easily filter out, right? Like if I wanted to just look, I've got this list, but what if I just wanted to look at all of the Simon malls that are in Florida or California here? I can easily do that and apply that, select them all 24 of them, and show insight, and it'll repopulate this same report just with those 24. I still got my place set of the 215, but all the reports have been updated to just show that. You could have easily just went back and created a new place set that was just Simon Malls, California, but you could also kind of rejigger it, if you will, as part of this existing place set to kind of explore and break things down here. But if I'm, a national owner of an entire media network like this, there's a lot of things you can learn. What kind of, customer breakdown or the people that are visiting my locations for me to approach advertisers, for me to approach product placement and such. Um, trade area, where are those visitors coming from? Are they all coming from local, from a network or individual locations? Um, but yeah, tons and tons of
And
stuff here.
and
Go ahead.
one story a lot of our mall clients would typically like to tell is how has visitation changed from COVID? So if you go back to the visits tab, you'll see that we see that significant drop in March of 2020, and then that steady increase kind of back to normal. And if you scroll down, you can actually see that year over year as well. So this would be nice if you're trying to tell a story on the return to malls after the COVID pandemic. So you see specifically for these mall sets that we've selected, that in many cases we are seeing an increase.
Yeah, good point. A whole lot of things you could dig in here. Awesome. So that's kind of and keep in mind, this is just kind of a large network of one media owner. You could have thousands of different types of this. And as Jessica kind of said at the beginning, all of these play sets that we're looking at are a little bit on the smaller side, but we support up to 2,000 kind of in this live interface um, that we can do in kind of a real-time aggregate. The next example is just kind of comparing a couple of Buffalo Wild Wings example. So this is Buffalo Wild Wings, a playset group in the Atlanta metro area, kind of the Atlanta DMA, if you will. 15 of those. You can kind of see that here on the map, kind of these that are around that metro. And I went ahead and built one of Buffalo Wild Wings in the Detroit metro. Um, Obviously, if you're trying to decide, which market to go into. If you're a competitor of Buffalo Wild Wings, you can look at this and kind of decide, well, which one of their markets are doing what kind of audience breakdown do they have? One of the interesting things that we kind of noticed just throwing this together was looking at these two audiences on the consumer segment to maybe note a surprise or to a surprise. There wasn't a whole lot of difference in a lot of their shared interests, right? Wine drinkers, beer drinkers, liquor, hard cider, wine, beer, liquor, hard cider. But I thought one of the things that was really, really interesting was how do I get to it was mode of transportation was in um, Atlanta, much, much more car drivers, where um, in Detroit, they had other modes of transportation that they use much more of. And I thought it was really interesting that in Atlanta, was it Coca-Cola that the number one drink? Let's see if I can find it. I don't know if it'll let me find it that way.
There we go.
Yes, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, Coca-Cola here's number one, right? How
yeah,
interesting
so
is that?
yeah, you could definitely say, is a Pepsi okay when you ask for Coca-Cola in Atlanta might be fighting words for some people. So it's definitely cool to see how that's represented within different place sets.
Yeah.
So you can see,
Or
even though a lot of interests are shared, there are some key differences just based on the pure demographic information of the market.
and this is just like I said, this is discovery, just kind of getting in here and really digging in and just playing around. The Not going to get into a political discussion here, but it was really kind of interesting to see the affiliation where one market has more Republicans, right? Where the other one, kind of getting down all the way here, is slightly tiered towards Democrats, right? You could look at that at percentages, 30-26 versus um, 26-28, kind of. A lot of similarities, but there's still those slight leanings that you would expect to see in different regions like this that you clearly see in the data. And of course, being able to see that in any of the table views on individual locations. If I wanted to drill into a specific Buffalo Wild Wings location, you could easily do that. Kind of see how that data is trending on any of these reports for that specific location. Or you can also click on this little dropper here from the table view, and it can show you that specific polygon of the place. So a lot of different things you can kind of see in here and kind of view. Oh, Fabian's got another question here I just saw pop in. For Medicaid and Medicare advertising campaigns in commercial malls, can you choose the dates that historically are showing heavily traffic of ages 55 plus?
So that's a really great question. So at the moment, we can provide demographics for the last 6 weeks rolling average, but we're working on being able to show that historically. So that is likely a question that we can answer in the future. But in the meantime, you could definitely view all malls across the United States and see what age groups are trending higher and which are trending lower based on the last 6 week rolling average. But great question. That's an excellent use case.
Yeah, it's not specifically something this tool is designed to solve, but we absolutely have that data and can do that research and return it to you. But it's a great use case. It's just some of the timing aspects of this tool are something that we're going to be building into more of the platform in the future, but we can absolutely get that data for you. All right. Um, so that's these two kind of Buffalo Wild Wings examples. The next one here is just, this is what I call the motor mile example. And I think this is fun to kind of see on the map, just to kind of literally this, I live in the upstate of South Carolina, the Greenville area, and we have this one stretch in Greenville called the Motor Mile. Literally 21 car dealerships along this stretch of road. And you could kind of see that there's a Ram dealership, an Infiniti, Mazda, Honda, um, Carlton, CarMax, the Mini, the Nissan. You've got all these car dealerships right here in this little stretch of road. If you're one dealership, conquest is your thing. How do they compare against each other? How does the audiences change against each other? right? What is the demographics as the place set might look similar, but I might want to do a lot more work drilling into individual things, especially if I'm the Ford dealership and maybe I want to compare what does my results look like against the Chevy one, right? Um, and you can really drill into these individually and see kind of some of the regional trends to help you conquest your competitor or do more of what you're doing. So I think that's kind of a more specific example of ways you could use this data, just a very local targeted one, but something that you can absolutely do here.
And if you go to the trade area, Kyle,
Mhm.
one thing we found particularly interesting is that it's not necessarily just the local market, right? So you have people coming from Nashville, South Carolina area, North Carolina area. So you're able to maybe, reach into those markets, mail flyers, things of that nature to bring in that non-local market as well.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, this is me being a local here. This is super interesting that Tennessee doesn't necessarily border South Carolina. I would expect to see more North Carolina and Georgia, but even Texas, people come from Texas to buy cars more than Georgia. That's super interesting. Why? Like I said, discovery tool to kind of drive into deeper questions that you can then kind of poke around the data to try to, see where it leads you. But good call out, Jess. All right. Quickly moving through these. So the next one to kind of look at is very different kind of use case. And the 15 places I've got here are the 15 counties in Arizona. So we said at the beginning, places can be more than just locations. They can be anything we can polygon. Well, we can polygon an entire county. Um, this will bring a little bit of differences to the data because some of these tools aren't necessarily purpose built for these set of use cases, but you can absolutely use them. First one right here to call out, Jess is like, look, all of my visits by hour are showing up at midnight. Why is that?
Sure. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they're arriving at midnight, but when we're looking at a larger geographic area, a lot of people don't necessarily travel out of that area a lot. So they tend to either work or commute within that same area. So if they're staying for multiple days, then they'll get counted at that 12 a.m. bunch. But you can see for individuals that are leaving, you see that peak around that 5 p.m. time frame, and then also in the morning as well. So you're capturing probably a lot of those morning and afternoon commuters who are traveling outside of that postal code and back in for work.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so we capture the first hour of the day that we see them. But that doesn't mean there's not tons of super interesting stuff here. I I think some of the more interesting stuff on a county level basis, right, might be, you could break it down into an individual county, where I know Maricopa County is Phoenix, right, the largest county in the state, and you could easily just spin all of this data to look at, okay, show me more information about the people in this county. Um, the demographics, the household income, things like that. And if you're running a media campaign, is this a county that I want to target or not? Right. Um, the map functionality doesn't necessarily work here because these are huge polygons, right? It is kind of zooming me into kind of that Phoenix area here, though. But you're not going to get the map to work when you're looking at regions as places. But everything else will, right? Like here's consumer profiles. Um, hundreds and hundreds of these that's breaking down the population of that county. And this is one where we actually see a lot more use cases that people have for trade areas, right, of a county. Especially as you're thinking about tourism. And depending on the county, right, Phoenix, Arizona might not have as much tourism as Los Angeles, or not Los Angeles, but Las Vegas, for example. But you could still see what states, DMAs, contributing counties and postal codes people come to this county. And, like I said, all of this, I can reset the selection, bring it back to all these 15 counties and easily kind of bring that into table view and do comparisons. And all of these are sortable columns. So I can kind of do that. And as you can see, Maricopa County, clearly the biggest county in the state. Um, so that's one kind of a regional. The other one here is These are postal codes. We can also consider postal codes as places, and this are any of you know that your 02108 zip code. These are all postal codes in Suffolk County, Massachusetts, otherwise known as Boston. Um, so a different sort of use case here that you could see. Once again, we'll see some similarities, right? Where by hour is heavily influenced by that, but a lot more commuting happening across postal codes here because it's a little bit smaller region than a county, right? But you can see demographics of the individual of this. We're essentially looking at a whole county view here, but I could easily break it down and like maybe I only care about those 3 postal codes and greatly narrow down my focus here. Similar data, once again, trade areas, super interesting and useful. Like I would imagine, I don't know which one of these counties is where, or postal codes is where Logan Airport is, but it probably has a very different breakdown because of the international travel and whatnot that come into that postal code.
Right. And one thing to point out is we already have all of these, all zip codes and all counties across the US preloaded in. So it's not something you have to request and then wait to get results back. You can have them instantly within the application.
Absolutely. And also, all that's in table view so that I've built this play set already. But yeah, all available to you. Oh, I like this for dealerships because using MotionWorks, you can compare the traffic among several stores at some specific date and cross-reference against the online sales campaigns they were performing at those times. It is too much. Yeah, so you absolutely could use point of sale data, cross-reference it with this. Like this is one input, right? Very much a discovery tool. And then Tony asked, do you use DOT traffic counts as part of your mobility verification?
We do. We actively source the DOT data automatically and incorporate that into our mobility product as well. So those are sources that we incorporate.
Just we also use like car data too from like OnStar and stuff, don't we?
Yeah, we have connected car data. In addition to that, I know airports were mentioned earlier. We use Bureau of Transportation statistics to look at the enplanements, deplanements, transfers, custom counts, transit ridership. We source those from the different transit authorities as well.
All right, and one last example to kind of show y'all as we kind of leave out here. I've got a place set here of 13 places here. This is a little bit different. It's not necessarily perfect or great, but just to leave you with something fun. What are these 13 places? Well, these are the arenas that March Madness is going to be happening at in a few months or a few weeks. I'm sorry. So you could do something like this where I've got these arenas across the country where, the basketball championship is going to have for college basketball. Look at demographics, right? If you're thinking about running a campaign into any of them, what kind of people typically go to these? Like I said, because these are more specific venues for this specific event, a lot of the consumer data is not necessarily going to match up, but you could see like over time what kind of traffic goes to places like this, right? Um, but just something else fun that we absolutely have data on places like this. And if you need to get certain timing of campaigns, we have that. This is not necessarily the tool to use it for it, but all of these locations, these arenas exist in here. Um, that's it. That's what I've got for demos. I see Christopher McCormick's got another question. How could you use this if I was trying to evaluate a multifamily asset that just finished construction and the owner is asking for a loan? I would say part of that would be household income in your market that you're caring about. You could look at some data because you're not really necessarily, I don't know, Jess, what do you think?
Um, you can look at, I believe, and we don't have it necessarily across all of our places, but we have specific behavioral cohorts that are planning to take a loan out, planning to buy a new home, things of that nature. we do have in the consumer profile. Typically what we'll report is the top percentage of the cohorts for a specific venue, but we do
Thinking.
have information that we can get into more specifically.
Yeah, and on that, you're probably not going to be able to see a specific home, right? But if you're looking at that across a postal code or a county or a larger region, you could use it to kind of help identify what locations might have a large mix of those kind of people, plugging in, a couple of different specific cohorts, right? Like if you know their household income, their ethnicity, things like that. Um, from other sources with the data, we can kind of use that to kind of cross-reference and discover. Uh, but yeah, we definitely have some of those in here.
All right, so do we have any other questions, comments?
So I know we're all going to follow. There's going to be a follow-up email to this webinar where everybody's going to be invited to get a free trial. So if you want to get in here and play around with the data, be on the lookout for that email. And I think from
Thank
us,
you.
that's it. If there are no other
Yep.
questions,
Thank you, Tony. We'll let you know that or let Kim know you said hi. Appreciate you taking the time to join.
awesome. Oops, slide. Yeah, that's it. If anybody's got any other questions, feel free to reach out to info, or like I said, we'll all be emailing everybody. And thanks everybody for your time today.
Yep. Thank you. Do you want to keep the webinar open for a few minutes, see if anyone has any lingering questions?
Sure.
All right, Christopher says one more. Christopher, was that one more example, one more drink, one more comments? I'm here for you, so we'll keep it open. Um, whatever you need. Let's see. MotionWorks will be collecting data from major events. Yes, so we measure different stadiums, different racetracks. All of those are places that we can measure, and we can actually curate those polygons and go back in time for historical events. So those are things we actively measure. Things like Super Bowl, as was mentioned, March Madness. Those are oftentimes polygons that we already have curated and are actively measuring.
Yeah, especially large events like that that have a significant um, audience to them, the modeling comes out a lot better, right? Then I want to know how many people went to this little local bar on this Thursday night, right? A lot harder to get that kind of modeling out than it is large events like that where we can scale up. Christopher, I'm trying to see if you can use it to predict how fast a new MF building will fill up. I don't know if I know what MF
Is that
manufactured.
multi-family,
Oh, map
multi-family MF? Ah,
multifamily.
okay. Yes, thank you.
So is this like a apartment building then versus like a single family? Okay. Um,
So you could look at using the consumer profiles, or really maybe even the anytime population might be good for something like this, to target renters, target people who are planning to move within the next year. Would probably be the best option for that. But for anytime population, we are releasing it down to a block group level shortly. So that could be a way to target specific areas and potentially model out how quickly an area may fill up.
Yeah, I mean, if there are other, buildings, apartment buildings that exist that maybe base some of that in the local area, and I don't know what full is going to look like, but if you have that data on your end and we can match that on our end with how many um, visitors we're seeing to kind of see what is when it starts construction versus what is fully occupied look like. You're probably able to get some predictive analysis to what other future buildings would do. I mean, that we'd probably want to have a discovery call to dive deeper into that with you. But I don't see why you couldn't use this sort of data to make educated guesses on that kind of stuff.
Right. And we've had some similar use cases in the past. So we actually group out our visitation based on dwell and category of visitor. So we're able to see overnight stays within specific locations. And we have, across the US worked with different clients who are adding new apartment buildings and they want to track over time, like, hey, what does that increase look like over time? So those are some use cases that we've had in the past, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, and even if the platform here isn't able to do that, doesn't mean we don't have the data and can't run the analysis to do it, just not software, right? We just might not have that use case built into the software yet. Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. Great. All right. Well, thanks everybody for attending, and I'm sure the recording and that invite to get a trial will be sent out soon, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. And we'll make sure that docs.MWorks links gets out to you too. So that way, if you need any fun reading material, feel free to check it out.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.
Thanks so much for joining. Have a great day.